So not only I have to follow that, but I also have to live with the fact that research says that this time of the day, right, it's about 3 p.m. right now, is the worst time for all of your attention spans, and second of all, for your mood. So you're not only zoning out, but you're also slightly pissed off. So, woo, let's do this. All right. So my name is Ilinca, and this is my first time at ABSL. And I've spent the last 7 years at Steelcase helping companies to leverage space to enhance the performance of their most important resource, which is not real estate, not robots, but people, right? So I'm talking about a topic today that, during the break when my colleagues were introducing me, the reaction was, ooh, neuroscience, right? It's also not the best topic maybe for 3 p.m., but I'll do my best to make it interesting, and I'll also kind of shift the responsibility to you guys. So I'm talking about neuroscience because at Steelcase, we create work environments to help people do their best work. And to do that, we need to understand what people actually do, right? What kind of work they do. And it's safe to assume that after everything we've heard today, there's still space for us humans, right? But there's space for us not to do routine, process, mindless, mind-numbing things, but there's space for us to do meaningful work. Knowledge work is one term for it. Work that requires our focus, our creativity, our critical thinking skills, and really our drive into them. So at the heart of all of that is, of course, our brain. Everything happens in the brain. So to design work experiences, we need to really understand what actually happens in the brain. So as Steelcase, we started doing some research and some experiments to get to the answer of that. And today I want to share some of that with you. So this research hasn't been published yet. And I don't want to just tell you what we learned. I want you to experience it for yourself. So that's the positive thing. You don't just get to listen to me and kind of zone out. You actually have to do stuff. So I will ask you to be my little rats, mice, meerkats, whatever animal you identify with. The point is not to replicate the experiments that we did at Steelcase. The point is just for you guys to understand how we learned what we learned, right? So I'm not wearing a lab coat. This is not being, well, it is recorded, right? But it's not statistically, empirically valid. All right, so are you ready? I heard a no, like a very soft no. All right, so you got these little bags. Can everybody locate their little gift bags? They're blue or red. In the bags, there will be a piece of paper that looks somewhat like this, in that it's paper. It has our logo on it. It says Steelcase. Oh, and the title of this presentation. And together with that piece of paper, you should also be finding a pen. The magic of analog in a conference about digitalization. You're welcome for the irony. Okay, so we learned this morning that as Romanians, because I'm Romanian as well, that we don't trust people, so I want to see your papers. Show me the papers, guys. Okay, perfect. All right, so we're going to do some experiments. The first experiment requires all of you to imagine and then draw your ideal workplace, right? So it's not a work of art. It's not supposed to be a work of art. Just scribble something, bird's eye view it, right? You see that none of these drawings are perfect. And I'm gonna try to set the mood so it's not so awkward. You have 2 minutes. Ideal workplace, guys. Draw something. All right. At least you're laughing, which means you're awake and or alive, so that's good. Okay, so guys, we're not going to use the drawings right now, right? So just put them aside. We'll come back to them in a few minutes. Just put them aside, put the pen aside, because we're going to do a next experiment right after this, which requires you to use your hands. So let go of the papers and get ready to do a second thing. Yes? All right. So if this was funny, The first thing was funny, the second thing will be even funnier. So, you will see some numbers flashing on the screen, and you will have to clap every time you see a number, except the number 3. It's a lot of information to digest for this time of the day again, but we're gonna do a practice round. The practice round has not started yet, but again, thank you for showing me that you're with me. So the practice round will be very quick. Between the numbers, you're gonna see X's. You're supposed to clap when you see the number, not the X, right? So this will be very quick. And go. And gotcha with that one. All right, that was the example. Now it's the real thing, yeah? It's gonna be a bit longer, right? Ready? Go. It's still going, guys. It's still going. Redemption. Gotcha again. All right. Thanks for that. So what the hell was that, right? So this is a test called the SART. It stands for Sustained Attention Response Task. And probably most of you, if you have a driver's license, you've taken it on a computer when you took your driver's license test. So what is sustained attention? It's what we normally call focus. All right, sustained attention is a process of attention. It's when you have selective, focused attention. It's when you have to maintain your vigilance. It's when you have to persist in your responses despite changing conditions. Right? When you really have to do something, you have to choose to do it. Despite the 1,000 things that are happening around you, despite the temptation to check Instagram, check your email, go for a smoke, walk out, all the things that you've probably been thinking of doing since I started talking, right? It's normal. I'm just telling you it's human. But thanks for not doing them a lot. Right? So that's sustained attention. So remember, I'm trying to understand, we're trying to understand as a company how you can design for specific cognitive functions. So why sustained attention? Probably most of you have seen the title or have read at least one of these articles, and I guess most of you work from an open plan office. Yeah? How many of you just despise the hell out of it? No, not as many, or like the person who designed it is sitting right next to you, I don't know. All right, so this, all of these studies, all of these articles have many things in common, right? They mainly talk about how terrible the open office is for privacy, for distractions, for the individual. But they also have two very important things in common that are not so obvious. The first one is the fact that none of these studies define what an open plan is. They just talk about the generic concept. So open plan literally means no walls or very little walls, but otherwise the design conditions are not really defined. Second of all, none of these studies are actual experiments. They're self-reported, how much do you hate your office on a scale of like, it's not an actual design experiment. So what we wanted to do as Steelcase is we wanted to actually create an experimental test. And we wanted to specifically know what setting, what furniture setting in this case has a positive impact on sustained attention. Right, so we created these two settings, what we call the bench environment, so your average open plan type of setting, and what we call the individual work environment, which in this case you see that it's a semi-enclosed thing, for lack of a better word. All right, so perhaps an incredibly obvious question, but when we gave the SART test that you guys took, when we gave it to participants, in which setting do you think they had more focus? Semi-enclosed, I hear. Any other? Yeah? Yeah, so, I mean, before you tell me in other news water is still wet, like, yes, of course. Of course it was in the semi-enclosed environment. But I didn't tell you two important things about the design of this experiment. The first one is that none of what you see there has any sort of acoustic properties. right? So if you're in the semi-enclosed situation, you hear as much noise as you do when you're in the open plan bench. Second of all, where you see position 3 and 4, so that means if I'm sitting in seat number 3 and I'm taking the test that you guys took, there's also a person sitting in spot number 4 taking the same test. So I'm never alone when I am at the bench. So the surprising thing is not the fact that you could sustain attention better in the individual work environment. The surprising thing is why. And our theory about why is a psychological concept called social facilitation and inhibition. So you have a positive thing, facilitation, and a negative thing, inhibition. What this theory says is that if I'm doing something simple, routine, repetitive that I've done many times before, if there are people around me, I'm going to score better. I'm going to perform better. But if I'm doing something new, something I've never done before, something complex, if there are people around me, I'm going to score less. So this makes a lot of sense when we think about our evolutionary brain, right? The fact that we needed to survive by monitoring others and by being vigilant. So what does that mean? That means that to improve attention in an open environment, it's not just about acoustics, right? That was our first finding. It's really not just about noise, because the noise that people experienced was the same. It's really about taking into account whether people feel socially inhibited or not. And therefore, a potential design element to bring in is if you don't have the space to actually have additional spaces where people can go to feel shielded, you can provide something very simple, mobile, that you can drag around with you if you have a day where you have something difficult to do, or a day where you feel vulnerable, or just a day where you need to focus better. All right, so that was the first experiment that we did. Now, if you go back to your sketches, since you had so much fun making them, your ideal workplace. So raise your hand if in your sketch there's some element of visual privacy or any sort of ability to hide. It doesn't have to be literal either, right? It can be like a cabin in the woods. There's always a cabin in the woods person. Yeah? So quite a few of you. All right, final experiment. Ready? Yeah. It's going to be totally different, right? Different. Okay. So I'm going to show you 3 words. You're going to have to guess which 4th word you can add to those 3 words to make it make sense. So I'm going to give you an example. Fish, mine, rush. Which 4th word, which word can you add to all 3 of these words and all 3 of them make sense? Random. All right. Gold. Exactly. Okay. So let's give this a try. You will not have 2 minutes. You have less than 2 minutes. Take your ideal workplace sketch, flip it over, turn it over, and try to solve these 5. There's no music this time. I'm sorry. I can sing though, but that might just make you perform a lot worse. So keep in mind that this is not a collective exercise. It's an individual exercise, but feel free to just look around the room as you're doing this. All right, who has an answer to the first one? Not you. Anyone? Bank, correct, right? You get why, right? There's a riverbank, a banknote, and a bank account. All right, second one. Forest, correct. Third one. Book, exactly, and I didn't know what a bookend was. That's a bookend, just a random piece of information in this talk, right? That's what a bookend is. What's the 4th one? Space, and the 5th one? Cheese, perfect. All right, so what the heck was that, part 2? That was a test called the RAT test. It's called the Remote Associates Test, and it's a test used to test how creative you are, to test something called creative cognition in psychology. So creativity has 1,000 definitions, but the one that is mainly used in social psychology has to do with the ability to take remote elements and make an association that is unique and that has value And the more remote the elements, the more difficult it is to make the association, the more creative the solution. Nothing new here, right? So back to our experimental conditions. We still have the bench environment and we have the individual work environment. People are given the RAT test. Which group scores higher? Anyone? We have some for open, some for... Everyone for open. All right. It was the open one, but that's not what current research says, right? So you guys intuited well, also because I kind of primed you by saying to look around. The current research says that when we're alone, when we want to do alone work, it doesn't matter what kind of work it is. We just give me a little void cubicle and I'll do my best. So it was at the bench. And the reason for that, the hypothesis that we have at the moment, because keep in mind that this is a kind of first of its kind experiment, even if you feel that the results are very they don't exist, right? There's no empirical evidence. The reason why it's you score higher on creativity in the open environment is because of this concept of expansive space. So you know, in the English language, you have some expressions like out-of-the-box thinking, lateral thinking as opposed to vertical thinking, broad thinking. So in environmental psychology, they actually tested it. And the result is that the more expansive the space, the more expansive your vista is, the higher the chance that you are going to come up with expansive ideas. So, which of you in your drawings have anything that has a view, a high ceiling, a different perspective, the ability to move? All right, more of you than on the enclosure side. Perfect. Okay, so what can you do, right, in terms of design? That is a very simple intervention. So I know a lot of you will say that we don't have space to, you know, we're not in New York, we don't have amazing views, we have the buildings that we have. But one thing that's important here is to change perspective, right? If you're having your employees sit in the same spot at the same desk every single day, the likelihood that they will come up with a new idea with a different angle is significantly decreased, right? Okay, so we're coming close to the end, so I have three kind of questions for you. The first question has to do with the concepts that I presented, and you'll notice that I didn't talk about the third one. Right, so the third concept is called involuntary attention. So sustained attention is when you choose to focus. It takes away a lot of your cognitive resources to do that, because our cognitive resources, guess what, they're finite, right? It's energy that at one point ends. For creative cognition, you also need a lot of energy, so your brain needs to chill out at one point. And the process is called involuntary attention. It's attention that you don't have to put effort into, and it's the moment in time when you zone out, when your voluntary attention just takes a little moment for itself. So the question I have to you, how are you supporting for these different cognitive tasks, right? Because it is surprising that for this, I mean, the absence of walls is beneficial for creativity, but it's not beneficial for sustained attention, right? This is not something that is currently being implemented within design. So what are you doing to actually allow people to shield themselves? What are you doing so that they don't actually feel socially inhibited at work and they're able to focus for a longer period of time? What are you doing to allow people to get different perspectives and different ideas within your office to broaden their view? And last but not least, how are you introducing natural elements within your space? And by natural elements, I don't just mean plants, right? Natural elements, the research that I didn't talk about, but you can read about already, it's published on our website. It's an article called the Restorative Office. So it's not just plants. I'm not saying take a forest, bring it into your office, but it's plant-like elements. It's natural elements, shapes, structures, colors, forms, all of these things that tell our brain that there's life there. Because guess what? If this environment that you're in is completely white, there's all the edges are completely straight, everything it's an artificial pattern, your brain, the evolutionary component of your brain just tells you that you're gonna die there. Because it's barren. Because that's not how your brain is designed at the moment to perceive the environment, and we don't want it to get there, right? So how are you designing for these different cognitive tasks? Because cumulatively over time, if you don't actually support the needs that individuals have within the office, you're taking a huge risk. And that risk is that your employee engagement will go down. So this is the research from 2016. I think at the moment it involved 16 countries. It's growing, right? And what we wanted to find out is whether between workplace satisfaction and employee engagement, whether there was a connection. And guess what? There is, right? So the higher you are satisfied, the more satisfied you are with your office, the higher the likelihood that you are engaged, right? So how are you actually ensuring that your workplace is supporting employee engagement? And I do have to end by making it very clear that space is not the solution to all of your problems. Space is not a means to an end, right? This whole conversation about the open office, good or bad, that's the wrong question to ask. The question is, what type of space, alongside the tools that you're using, alongside the processes that you're implementing, alongside the culture that you are promoting, the behaviors that you are displaying every day, how do these come together so that you can reach your organizational goals, right? So space is an enabler, but can also be a disabler, but not alone, right? It's always within this kind of holistic. So this is we call it the work experience model. So we use it as a starting point whenever we design. And hopefully that this is a conversation that we can continue having, right? Because if there's one thing at Steelcase, you know, when the word onboarding was used a lot today. So at the end of any onboarding, you come out knowing for a fact that space shapes behavior, and that behavior over time is culture. And we know that for ourselves. We know that when we go on vacation. We know that when we design our homes. We know that when we tell people about the places that we like, but somehow we get to work and either we forget or we just stop caring. But space does shape behavior, and that behavior over time is culture. Thank you very much.